And God had chose.
Y'all, I need you to sit down for this one. Remember that pastor up in Pennsylvania who was literally preaching when some dude stood up and aimed a gun straight at him during service?
Jesus! Jesus!
Well, that pastor lived because the gun jammed. Divine intervention, right? But listen, Pastor William B. Schooler, he wasn't going to get that same miracle. This decorated veteran and man of God got executed in his own church office, and baby, the shooter, was his own flesh and blood. This is the story of Reverend William B. Schooler's life and death. And girl, when I tell you what went down at St. Peter's Missionary Baptist Church.
We had a gentleman come in, and he went to sit down doing prayer, and he sat there for a few minutes, and then after prayer, he got up, and he went back in our pastor's office, and then I heard two shots. It wasn't a minute, and I heard two shots, and so I just got everybody out of the church. And you know, we just kept hearing shooting, bang, bang, bang.
Like, how do you even process that? But hey, let me back this thing up and tell you about who William Schooler really was. See, Reverend William B. Schooler wasn't just your average pastor, okay? This man was a leader, a decorated war hero, a mentor, and honestly, the kind of person that held entire communities together. We're talking about a man whose whole life was built around serving others, and that calling started way before he ever stepped foot in a pulpit. Born in 1945 right there in Dayton, Ohio, William grew up in a household where faith wasn't just something you talked about on Sundays, it was how you lived. The man graduated from Dunbar High School in 1963, and let me tell you something, he had dreams bigger than just staying in his hometown. He wanted to serve something greater than himself. So what did William do after graduating? He joined the U.S. Army and got deployed to Vietnam. Now, Vietnam was no joke, y'all, but this man didn't just survive over there, he thrived. William came back home as a decorated veteran with a Bronze Star on his chest. Think about that for a second, a Bronze Star. That's not something they just hand out. You gotta show real courage under fire to earn that. But here's what gets me about William's story. War didn't make him hard. It didn't turn him cold or bitter like it does some folks. Instead, it humbled him. It made him realize that his purpose was to keep serving, just on a different kind of battlefield. So when William got back to Dayton, he walked straight into Dayton Public Schools and became a teacher. And baby, he wasn't just any teacher. Students remembered this man not just for what he taught them from books, but for how he showed up for them every single day. He had this calm energy about him, you know, the kind of presence that made you want to do better, not because he was yelling or threatening you, but because you could see he genuinely believed in you. His expectations were high, but so was his support. And the students, they didn't just respect him, they loved him. Moving on, William eventually became a principal in the Jefferson Township District, and he served in that role for almost 20 years. 20 years, y'all. Think about how many young lives he touched in 2 decades. This man knew the names of his students. He asked about their families. He showed up for them through graduations, through struggles, through everything. Day after day, year after year, William was that steady force that kids could count on. But then 1997 came around and William decided to retire from education. And honestly, the school system was never quite the same. Like, you know when certain people leave a place and you can just feel the difference? That was William. Those hallways felt different without him walking through them. Now, William had always been active in his faith. That was never a question. But after stepping away from education, something shifted. He felt called to embrace ministry full-time, and that's when he became pastor of St. Peter's Missionary Baptist Church in Dayton. And let me tell you, this man was gifted in the pulpit. His sermons weren't just feel-good messages that made you clap and go home. They were challenging. They were rooted in scripture, but they spoke directly to real-life struggles. William had this way of taking biblical truth and making it relevant to what people were actually going through.
See, on Facebook, you look for likes. In this book here called the Bible, you look for love.
Period. That's the kind of wisdom William was dropping on his congregation every Sunday. But William's impact went way beyond the church walls. This man was serving as interim president of the Dayton School Board. He was president of the local Baptist Ministers Union. He worked with civic leaders, other churches, youth organizations, you name it. William was the kind of person that when problems came up in the community, folks would say, "We need to call Pastor Schooler."
He's done a lot, within the community. He's touched a lot of young people's lives, and he was an integral part in my rear.
That's the impact we're talking about. William wasn't just preaching about making a difference, he was the difference. So what I need y'all to understand is this. Reverend William B. Schooler was a man who had dedicated his entire life to service. From Vietnam to the classroom to the pulpit, everything he did was about lifting other people up. He was the person others turned to not just for guidance but for grace. And that's what makes what happened next so absolutely devastating. Now, February 27, 2016 was just another evening for William. Dayton City Commissioner Joey Williams had called him up and they spent time talking about something that had been heavy on Williams' heart for years: youth violence prevention. This wasn't just casual conversation, y'all. William had been working on initiatives to address violence in the community, trying to reach young people before they got caught up in situations that could destroy their lives. Ironic, right? The man who would be taken by violence was spending his last night alive trying to prevent violence. But what nobody knew, not Joey Williams, not the congregation, not even William himself, was that the very violence he was trying to stop was about to walk right into his church. And it was going to come from the last person anyone would expect. Sunday morning, February 28, 2016, just another regular service at St. Peter's Missionary Baptist Church. William had just finished delivering his sermon. Congregation was still buzzing with that good Sunday energy, folks fellowshipping and getting ready to head home for dinner. William slipped away to his office like he always did after service. This was his quiet time where he'd pray, reflect on the message, maybe prepare for the week ahead. His office sat right behind the pulpit, a peaceful little space where he counseled married couples, comforted people who'd lost loved ones, planned sermons full of hope. But peace wasn't what was coming. A man walked into that sanctuary, someone nobody expected to bring death into God's house. It was Daniel Schooler, William's own 68-year-old baby brother. Now witnesses said Daniel came in real quiet, sat down in one of the pews, looked like he was praying or thinking about something heavy. Nothing seemed off about it at first. Church folks are used to people coming in to pray even after service ends. Then Daniel stood up. He walked straight toward that back office where his brother was. No hesitation, no looking around. Just walked right up in there like he had business to handle. That's when those gunshots rang out.
Pow, 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 pow. And that's when everybody started running.
Girl, can you imagine? 1 minute you're saying goodbye to church members, talking about how good the service was, and the next minute you're hearing gunshots coming from your pastor's office. Alberta Blath, who'd been going to that church for years, she knew exactly what those sounds meant. She didn't waste time trying to figure out if she was hearing things. She started getting people out. Curtis Booker, the choir director, said it was pure terror. The whole congregation just ran. People were screaming, trying to get to the exits, not knowing if they were safe or if whoever was shooting might come for them next. While all that chaos was happening in the sanctuary, something cold and calculated was going down in that little office behind the pulpit. Daniel Schooler had pulled out a handgun and fired multiple rounds at his 71-year-old brother William. This wasn't random. Police made it clear. William was the only target, no struggle beforehand, no big argument that people could hear. Just Daniel walking in there with purpose and ending his brother's life in a matter of seconds.
This wasn't somewhat of an active shooter. The officers did exactly what they were trained to do. They knew there was a shooter inside.
Police say the accused shooter, Daniel Schooler, knew the victim, his brother.
Think about that. Not some stranger who'd lost his mind. Not some random person targeting churches. William's own brother. The sanctuary that had been filled with Sunday peace just minutes before turned into complete chaos. Church members who were still in the building heard those shots and panic set in. Some folks ran toward the parking lot. Others were trying to figure out what was happening, hoping maybe they'd heard something else. A car backfiring, construction noise, anything but what it actually was. Dayton police got the call and responded fast. We're talking minutes. But when somebody's determined to kill, minutes might as well be hours. Officers arrived to find Daniel Schooler still inside the church. He hadn't run, wasn't trying to hide or escape, just standing there near where it all went down with this eerie calmness that made the whole thing even more disturbing. Daniel surrendered without putting up any fight. No drama, no standoff. He just gave up like what he'd come to do was finished, and now he was ready to face whatever came next. Meanwhile, paramedics rushed to the back of the church, heading for that office where William spent so much time in prayer and preparation. They found Reverend Schooler collapsed right there in his own space, Despite everything they tried, despite how fast they worked, it was already over. William had died in the same room, where he'd helped people through their darkest moments, where he'd planned messages of hope and healing. The irony cuts deep. Outside the church, words spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Police had to address the media, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense to anybody. During those first hours of investigation, the shock started giving way to questions. Everybody was asking why. What could make one brother take another brother's life in such a sacred place? That's when police started digging into Daniel Schooler's background, and what they found painted a picture nobody was prepared for. Daniel wasn't some unknown quantity. His history with the law was long and disturbing, full of patterns that should have been red flags. At the center of it all was something that family members had been dealing with for years but couldn't fix: untreated mental illness. Joyce Napier, the brother's niece, came forward and confirmed what some family members already knew. Daniel had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, two serious mental health conditions that, when left untreated, could turn dangerous. See, as children, William and Daniel had been close, two sons from the same family, growing up together. But as the years went on, Daniel started drifting away from the family. His illness, when it wasn't being managed properly, began breaking down the relationships he had with people who loved him. Both men were described as good uncles, decent people at their core, but Daniel's untreated mental health issues created a different person, someone volatile, unpredictable, and ultimately dangerous. The police investigation revealed Daniel's criminal history, and it was a disturbing timeline of escalating violence that nobody had been able to stop. So when police started digging deeper into Daniel Schooler's past, they uncovered a timeline that was absolutely chilling. This wasn't someone who just snapped one day. This was a man whose violent behavior had been escalating for years, and the system kept failing to stop him. Let's start with 2001. Daniel got charged with felonious assault and carrying a concealed weapon. Now, at first, he tried to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, but then something changed, and he switched to a guilty plea, got sentenced to probation. Here's the part that's gonna make you mad, though. The court actually noted that Daniel might be mentally ill and in need of treatment. They saw the warning signs, they put it in writing, but nothing meaningful happened with that information. 2002 rolls around, and Daniel's behavior got even worse. He attacked a woman who was visiting his home, and when I say attacked, I mean he brutalized this woman. She was beaten, bitten, cut with a knife, and choked for 40 minutes straight. 40 minutes, y'all. That's not a moment of rage, that's sustained, calculated violence. Daniel got convicted of felonious assault with a deadly weapon and sentenced to 2 years in prison. But prison time didn't change him. If anything, it seemed like he came out worse. In 2007, Daniel struck a friend in the face with a golf club, completely unprovoked. Just walked up and hit this man with a golf club, left him with a black eye. When police questioned the victim, he said something that should have sent up every red flag possible. The victim claimed Daniel had a mental problem. But get this, the victim declined to press charges, so the case got dismissed. Another opportunity to get Daniel help. Another chance to protect the community, just thrown away. Then 2008 happened, and this is where it gets really scary. Two men claimed Daniel threw a hammer at them, then came after them with a 6-inch knife in his hand. Police noted something crucial in their report. Daniel was known to become violent when he failed to take his medication. So let me get this straight. The police knew Daniel had mental health issues. They knew he became dangerous when he wasn't medicated. Family members knew he was struggling with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The courts had been warned multiple times about his potential for violence, and yet, somehow, Daniel Schooler was still able to walk into a church with a handgun and murder his own brother. Make it make sense. After Daniel's calm surrender at the church, the legal process began. He was hit with serious charges: 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of using weapons while under disability. They denied him bond and held him at Montgomery County Jail while he waited for trial. Montgomery County Prosecutor Matt Heck Jr. called it exactly what it was: a tragic and senseless shooting. He extended condolences to the Schooler family and the entire St. Peter's congregation. During the court proceedings, Daniel's attorney raised questions about his mental competence to stand trial. After years of psychiatric struggles, there were real concerns about whether he could even understand what was happening to him legally. Multiple evaluations were done, and eventually Daniel was deemed fit to stand trial. But the question that kept hanging over everything was, what made Daniel kill William, a man who devoted his whole life to peace and family? Investigators found out there had been some family lawsuit in the past. Daniel had taken William to court over estate matters, but that case had been dismissed long ago. The shooting wasn't about money or family property disputes. It came down to years of untreated mental illness and whatever resentment had been building up in Daniel's mind over time. The aftermath left the Schooler family completely shattered. Think about it, in one devastating moment, they lost two beloved family members. Can you hear the pain in those words? This family was dealing with a grief that most people can't even imagine. They were mourning William while also mourning the Daniel they used to know before mental illness consumed him. Church members were just as devastated. Many had known William not just as their pastor but as a friend, counselor, and source of strength through every stage of life. His death didn't just leave an empty pulpit. It left a hole in people's hearts.
I can't believe it.
It was awful. It was awful.
He just told me today, Sister McGraw, I'm proud of you. Get yourself together and, continue doing God's work.
I got a call from my daughter. That part is very hard to talk about.
Local leaders and clergy gathered for prayer vigils and candlelight services. William's funeral was held at Omega Baptist Church, one of the largest congregations in Dayton. The place was packed, pews overflowing with mourners, family, friends, fellow pastors, elected officials, former students, and regular citizens whose lives William had touched. Speaker after speaker got up to share memories of a man who was defined by service, not ego. They talked about his steadiness, his kindness, the light he brought to dark places. But mourning wasn't the only response to this tragedy. People started demanding answers about how this was allowed to happen.
Everyone from local pastors to a U.S. congressman are remembering Pastor Schooler and his impact in the Gem City. Police say the 70-year-old was shot and killed in his office as Sunday celebrations wrapped up at St. Peter's Missionary Baptist Church. The suspect is his younger brother, Daniel Schooler, who has been arrested and awaiting formal charges. St. Peter's is a family church of the Schooler brothers. It was led by their father, Reverend Alan Schooler. After their dad's death in the 1970s, older brother William took over. People say even before then, he served as a community pillar. He fought for fair access to banks when PNC tried to leave the West Town Shopping Center. Reverend Schooler also creating new initiatives for education in his nearly 3 decades of service in Dayton and Jefferson Township. Tonight, one group is calling Pastor Williams' death a tragedy and that it highlights the issue with access to guns and gun violence.
People were asking the hard questions. How does someone with Daniel's history of violence and untreated mental illness get access to a gun? Where were the mental health systems that should have been helping him? Why did the legal system keep missing opportunities to intervene before it was too late?
As a member of the Black community that has learned from men like Dr. Schooler, we will continue to not be deterred from the greater cause, and that is the charge and cause to continue to work collectively to improve the conditions like gun violence. In Dayton, the solution lies collectively in our ability and our concern with addressing these issues. And so it is not just one solution, but it takes time. We have to build legislation, we have to do it through government, we have to do it neighborhood by neighborhood.
This tragedy exposed failures at every level: mental health systems, legal oversight, gun access regulations. But more than that, it reminded everyone that family doesn't always mean safety. And staying silent about mental illness doesn't make it disappear, it makes it deadly. Reverend William Schooler spent his entire life fighting for change, justice, and peace in his community. From the battlefields of Vietnam to the classrooms of Dayton to the pulpit of St. Peter's, he was always about lifting people up and making things better. In his honor, that fight has to continue. With every voice that speaks up about mental health, with every person who demands better from our systems, with every act of courage that says this cannot happen again. William's legacy isn't just in the lives he touched, or the students he taught, or the sermons he preached. His legacy is in the reminder that we all have a responsibility to look out for each other, to speak up when we see warning signs, and to demand better from the systems that are supposed to protect us. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that we need to do better, then William's death wasn't completely in vain. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that matter, stories about real people whose voices need to be heard, then you need to subscribe to Unheard Cries TV. We're not just telling true crime stories for entertainment. We're shining light on cases that expose the systems that fail us, the violence that destroys families, and the voices that get silenced. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our content. Because these stories, they need to be told, and these voices, they need to be heard. What do you think about this case? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this conversation going. Because change starts with conversation, and conversation starts with us.